Today we're going to be solving completing the square. We're going to be solving quadratic equations, but we're going to be using a different method. We're going to be completing the square. Our standard is 8.0, and our objective is to be able to complete the square. And we're going to be solving real-life problems on Friday and also on next week. Completing the square is just a process that will allow you to write an expression of the form ax squared plus bx as a square binomial. A square binomial is a binomial, x plus a number, and that's going to be squared. And we're going to have to memorize a formula. And if you guys have a highlighter, you guys can use a highlighter to highlight b over 2 squared to be able to complete the square. But let's go through example number 1. Example number 1, we are going to be solving this quadratic equation. And I know that many of you guys say, no, can I just solve it by factoring? You'll get exactly the same answer, but we need to be able to use both processes in different equations. Today, I need you guys to solve it by factoring, because sometimes, as you guys will see on example 2, you cannot always factor, and completing the score will be a quick process that will allow you to get the correct solution. First, as we see here, we need to be able to move the 15 to the right. We're going to let the x's be on the left hand side and the number on the right. So it'll be x squared minus 2x. I'm going to move my 15 to the right. It's going to become a positive. And notice that I left some space in here because we are going to have to complete the square. Now, to be able to find the number that we need to place in here, we're going to use the formula above, which is b over 2 squared. We're going to take the value of b, divide by 2, and then square it. In this case, b is negative 2. So be negative 2 divided by 2, and then we are going to square it. Negative 2 divided by 2 will be negative 1. We are going to square it. So we're still trying to find the number that we're going to use here. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. So basically place the negative 2 into the formula, divide by 2, square it, and that'll give us the number that we need to add here, which is positive 1. And what I do on one side, I need to do to the other side. Now I need to be able to factor the left hand side. So I have double parentheses. I must simplify the right, so that gives me 16. Factors of x squared will be x and x. Factors of 1 will be 1 and 1, and they both have to be negative. Now, since they both are the same, I can go ahead and rewrite it as 1. So this will give me x minus 1 squared equal to 16. Now that I rewrote it as 1, I can get rid of the square by taking the square root on both sides. The square and the square root cancels. I end up with x minus 1 is equal to 4. And yes, don't forget your plus or minus. And let me just go and draw out the line. Now I'm going to move my 1 to the right hand side. That's going to become a positive 1. So I have x is equal to 1 plus or minus 4. Don't forget, as we talked about before, you won't be able to place your 1 in front of it, to the left. And don't forget to change the sign. Many of you guys are forgetting to change it to the opposite. This is a negative 1, becomes a positive 1. That will give me two solutions. It will be 1 plus 4, which is 5. The other one will be 1 minus 4, which is negative 3. These are called the x-intercepts. They're also called the roots, the solutions, or the zeros. So this is where the graph will cross the x-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And negative 3. 1, 2, 3. X squared is positive, so we know that the parabola is facing up. Now, if we want to be able to find the lowest point, then we can find the vertex by plugging in using the formula negative b over 2a. But at this point, you guys get the idea that the solutions that we found are the x-intercepts. Let's continue with example number 2. On example number 2, we need to be able to solve the quadratic equations by completing the square. Letter A. I want to be able to leave the x's on the left-hand side. Therefore, I'm going to move my 10 to the right. It's going to become the opposite, so that's a negative. I'm going to leave some space because I want to complete my square. Now, to get this number, you can use the formula above, and I'm going to do it on the left-hand side. So it'll be b over 2, b divided by 2, and then I'm going to square it. b is negative 6, so it'll be negative 6 divided by 2, I'm going to square. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3 squared, which is positive 9. Therefore, I'm going to add 9 on this side, and what I do on one side, I need to add on the other side. Now, instead of doing this, a lot of the times I just do this in my head. So I say, okay, I'm going to take negative 6, I'm going to divide by 2, which is negative 3, and then I'm going to square it, which is positive 9. So you guys can either use the formula and write it down on the left-hand side, or you can just do it in your head. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and then square is positive 9. Since I'm always squaring it, this will always be positive. So from here, I'm going to combine, factor this out. This will be negative 1. Factors of x squared will be x and x. Factors of 9 will be 3 and 3. And they both have to be negative. Since they both are the same, and they always should be the same, I'm going to rewrite it as 1. Now I can get rid of the square by taking the square root on both sides. The square root and the square cancel, so we have x minus 3 is equal to, the square root of 1 is 1, plus or minus, but because there's a negative inside, it's going to be a I. Now, some of you guys might want to just write down plus or minus I, which should be fine. I'm going to move my 1 to the right. It's going to become a positive. X is equal to positive 3 plus or minus I. And because we cannot combine them, we can just leave it as this. Remember to show me all the steps. Don't take any shortcuts, please. For letter B, I'm going to go through the same process. I want to be able to leave the x's on the left-hand side. So that means I'm going to move this to the left, becomes a negative 2x. That will give me x squared. 6x minus 2x is positive 4x. I'm going to leave some space, and that's going to be equal to 1. Remember to leave some space so we can complete the square. Now, if you want to use the formula on the left, it's fine. Go and write it down. I'm just going to do it in my head. Half of 4 is 2, and then square 2 gives me positive 4. And what I do on one side, I need to do to the other side. Remember, how I got this 4. I'm going to take half of 2, which is 2. Half of 4, which is 2. And then I'm going to square it, and that's 4. I'm going to factor the left-hand side. That's equal to 5. Gives me x and x. Factors of 4 will be 2 and 2, and they both have to be positive. That gives me 2x, and 2x is positive 4x. From here, they are both the same, so I can rewrite it as 1. Now I can get rid of the square by taking the square root on both sides. The square and the square root cancels, so I have x plus 2 is equal to square root of 5 will be this plus or minus square root of 5. We cannot simplify it. I'm going to move my 2 to the right. That's going to become a negative. That gives me x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 5. And that'll be my answer. Let's continue with example number 3.